Hi, my name is Lorna. I'm part of the Pioneer Fellowship in Portsmouth Anglican Diocese. Chris has just asked me to share a really short thought with you guys this week, so here it is. It's from Matthew 14, verse 22. It's the story of Jesus walking on the water. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So you've got to love Peter, probably the most enthusiastic of all the disciples at any given moment. There's a boat full of people, and he's the one saying, "Lord, call me. If it's you, call me out onto the water to join you." And that's exactly what Jesus does. Jesus says, "Yep, it's me. Come join me." And all goes really well. There's Peter going out on the water with Jesus. Now, I think this is one of the stories that it's really easy to forget the detail, what actually happens. And I think actually for a very long time, I subconsciously was recalling this story as the story of Peter who drowned. It turns out Peter doesn't drown, which is definitely reassuring for many obvious reasons. So what does actually happen in this story? Well, we've got Jesus identifying himself to Peter, and then Jesus doing what Peter has asked him to do. He's calling him out, and we see tremendous courage at this point from Peter. Peter perhaps has learned from the previous experience of being in a boat in a storm with Jesus, where they've woken him up in fear of their lives. This time, Peter's not going to get caught out. Peter's saying, "I'm not afraid and I want to come join you." That's great. You've got to love Peter. And you've also got to love Peter because there he is, and he probably thinks he's got a really good deal going on, and he's showing off a bit maybe because he's the only one that's taken the initiative and he's got out of the boat. That's great. But what we don't see is we don't see Jesus stilling the circumstances around Peter. So all of a sudden, it seems that Peter has a fresh awareness of what's going on around him. And as he sees the waves, the reality of the where he is and the what is going on, he is overwhelmed. And you can imagine these were probably quite big waves. I would be daunted, and I don't have a problem with Peter being daunted. And Jesus doesn't have a problem with it either. There's Peter, he sees the waves, and the moment that happens, it seems that all of a sudden he begins to sink. And at that moment, the fear kicks in. So he's gone from courageous overdrive moment to, oh my goodness, look at the reality around me, sinking. So he does the sensible thing and he calls on Jesus. Jesus is actually already there. He hasn't left Peter. So that means immediately Jesus responds. He puts out his hand and he saves Peter. But he hasn't ever left Peter. Peter's focus changed. Somewhere along the line, Peter went from looking and recognizing and knowing Jesus to seeing the great, big, real wave and thinking, whoa, trouble, fear, reality, circumstances. I think this is a great story for understanding where we're at now, some of us. I think some of us would say that we got out the boat a while ago, that, we recognized Jesus. He identified himself to us. We asked him, do you want us to come out on the water? And he said, yeah. And we got out of the boat. But now we see the circumstances. And actually, that can be really scary. And especially in these times, it can be really overwhelming. And we perhaps are experiencing real high waves in our lives at the moment. Waves of fear, anxiety, lack of control of our circumstances as things around us are just so completely unknown to us at the moment. It's a really real storm that we're in. The wind is strong. When we're on the water, Jesus doesn't necessarily calm the waves, but what he does do is stay with us. He is still with us. We might have these inexplicably high waves in our lives at the moment, but Jesus hasn't left us. And when we begin to sink or feel like we're sinking, we can still call on his name. And we haven't got to call loudly because he is right there with us. And he reaches out and he rescues us. And the real joy is that happens time and time and time again. It's not a restricted offer. It's not a one-time offer. And we really know that. If we follow the story of just Peter through the Gospels, we can see Peter time and time again thinking he's got it right, thinking he's got it sorted, and actually time and time again going back to Jesus and going, nope, still learning, still persevering, still going through stuff. And that, I think, is probably one of the most reassuring things about the story of Peter. If we were to only ever follow him, we would see his example is someone who returns time and time again to Jesus after doubt, after messing up. He goes back to Jesus every time without fail. And he is the one that Jesus turns around and says to, it's you, Peter, who I will build my church on. So if you're feeling like you are someone who is sinking right now, first off, call on Jesus, and you know that he is there with you in the wind, in the high waves, and he will look after you. And secondly, you're not redundant. He can and will still build with someone like me and like you, who sometimes feels like in these storms we are sinking. This is a story of hope. This is our story too. Let's just take a moment to pray. Father, I thank you, Lord, that you have identified yourself to us and that you have called each of us to follow you. Father, I pray, Lord, that you would renew our courage, that you would give us open hearts and open minds day by day to courageously follow you. Amen. Thank you.